Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I apologize ahead of time for the video quality of this. The camera that I usually use for my videos I can't use at the moment because the battery is dead. So I am using my webcam, and as you can see I am coming to you from a different filming location instead of in front of my bookshelf. I'm on my couch. I could have wheeled my laptop over in front of the bookshelf and just did it from there, but I honestly wasn't in the mood to do that right now. So anyway, I did try to do this video last week, but the video was too long, and every time I tried to edit it and cut it down, it was still too long. It was a length that I'm pretty sure most people would not have sat through. So I decided to redo this, and I'm hopefully going to make this shorter than what it was last time. Today we are doing a review of Touched by Elisa S. Amore. It's the Caress of Fate. When I started reading it, I didn't really know too much about it. I bought it, I think, for 99 cents on the Kindle store a while back, and it just kind of sat on my Kindle for the longest time, and then finally I decided I was going to pick it up and read it, and because it had been so long I didn't really remember what it was about, so I went into it not really remembering too much about it. This book was about a teenage girl named Gemma. I believe she was about 17 years old in high school, and we find out that she's a bookworm. She loves books. She has this best friend named Peter. She's been friends with him since childhood. They're next door neighbors, known each other for a long time, and her life is pretty normal. You know, she has two parents who own a local diner. They work there a lot, so she doesn't really get to see her parents too often. But you know, she has a pretty normal life. She's an only child. She doesn't have any siblings. So start out the story where she's supposed to meet Peter at the park in the town Lake Placid where she lives, and he's late. She brings her dog with her, and her dog ends up taking off into the woods. So she has to go in after her dog, and when she goes into the woods, she sees this guy, and he's just kind of dark and mysterious. She doesn't really know who he is. It's not somebody she's seen before, and for whatever reason she's drawn to him, and she is like in a trance, just kind of staring at him. And what breaks her out of that trance is she hears Peter calling to her, and she doesn't see him again for about 4 weeks until she's sitting in the auditorium at her school for one of her friends' plays that they're in, and she sees him in a couple rows behind her, and he keeps looking at her, she keeps looking at him, and it's just kind of like this unspoken connection between the two of them. So I'm going to stop right there for a moment because it will get into spoilers the more I go in. This book is more or less a fallen angel book, but the angel is actually an angel of death. And it's forbidden love. I guess you could pretty much figure that out because a lot of the fallen angel stories that you read are forbidden love. I really enjoyed it, so, but yeah, that's pretty much the premise of the story. Fallen angel falls in love with human girl. It's forbidden, they're not supposed to. So if this sounds like something you are interested in, you want to read, and you don't want to be spoiled, now would be the time to click off the video. After she sees him in the auditorium at the play, she sees him in school the next day, and he's with this girl who's absolutely beautiful and seems to be drawing the attention of a lot of guys. She seems to be hanging all over this guy that she had seen in the forest and then also in the auditorium at the school. To find out, he's in the same class as her, and the teacher introduces them. The mysterious guy, his name is Evan James, and the girl's name is Generva. They never give her a last name in the book, but she actually turns out to be one of my favorite characters. I loved Generva. I thought she was awesome. So, basically, it's one of those things where, because he's so strange and mysterious, she doesn't really talk to him at first. But she could swear that she keeps hearing his voice in her head. He keeps popping up in her dreams, and it all just seems so real. She wants to know what it is about this guy, Evan, why she's so drawn to him, why she feels this connection to him. And of course, she also has what everybody calls insta-love. She pretty much falls in love with him from the first time she sees him in the forest. Like, she can't stop thinking about him. And it's basically the same way with Evan. The book does switch back and forth between their points of view, so you do kind of get the sense of what they're both thinking. But, yeah. We have different parts of the story where it's very dark and foreboding, I guess you could say. Like, Gemma will sense that somebody's there, and every time she looks, there's no one there. When Evan is in her dreams, he tells her, you know, we can't be together. You know, I have to stay away from you. He keeps saying that he has to abort the mission, that he'll get somebody else to do it in his place. And of course, Gemma doesn't know what he's talking about. And we find out that what he was talking about is he is the angel of death who has been given the task to kill Gemma. And because he's fallen in love with her, he doesn't want to do it, and he's trying to distance himself from her so that when the time comes for him to end her life, it'll be easier on him. But at the same time, he's kidding himself, because he has fallen in love with her. We actually find out that she's supposed to be riding her bike to school to turn in a photography project for her photography class that she forgot to hand in the day before, and this is a Saturday morning. Her bike, and she's rushing. She has her headphones in, and she's not really paying attention, and there's supposed to be this big semi that comes out and hits her, and that's supposed to be what ends her life. But Evan ends up intervening, and was there with him, and she is really, really upset. She's like, you know, you're messing with fate. This is not going to be good for us. And of course, it's just one of those things where we have to pretty much assume that once that happens, it's not going to be good for any of them. And of course, it's not. Okay. So there's mention of this masala, as they call it, and it seems to be something that Evan and Ginevra are afraid of. So they seem to be really afraid of this masala, and there are two other characters that we meet named Simon and Drake, and they're also angels of death as well as Evan. Come to find out, though, Ginevra is actually a witch. She's actually with Simon, and she left her coven to be with Simon. So while she is a witch, she pretty much has learned to control the evil side of her. Oh, that's my train of thought. Oh. After he intervenes, and they have to deal with this whole masala thing, I guess they're pretty much, I guess you could say, the rulers, for lack of a better word, of these angels of death. I'm guessing that's what it is. And the day of the accident, Gemma's actually supposed to be going to the prom, and Peter's taking her. And things start out pretty well, but then as soon as Peter realizes that she's looking for Evan, he gets really upset and storms off. Now, we find out in the story that Peter has stronger than just friendly feelings for Gemma, but she doesn't reciprocate those feelings. And I guess it just really bugs Peter. I'm pretty sure he figured that part out. And also, it's mentioned more than once in the book that every time Evan sees Peter, he has this strong, unexplainable urge to end Peter's life. Not sure if that means deep down that Peter's evil or what that is, because it's something that they never actually get to in the book, but it's hints at it pretty strongly that there's something about Peter that is not right. While they're at the prom, Ginevra actually comes over to Evan and Gemma who are dancing, and she's like, he is here. And of course, Gemma is like, what does Ginevra mean by he? Who is this he? Come to find out, it is actually an executioner. He is also an angel of death, but he's the one that comes and, I guess you could say, finishes whatever another angel of death failed to complete. So Evan failed to end Gemma's life, so this executioner is there to do it for him. He tells Ginevra, you know, you stay with her, do not lose sight of her. She doesn't listen, she takes off, and Ginevra tries to chase after her to keep tabs on her, make sure that she's not going to end up hurt, and they end up separated. Ginevra gets trapped inside the school, and Gemma ends up outside the school, and of course the doors between them ends up somehow locked. And Ginevra is telling her, run, you know, just run. Gemma feels like this dark foreboding presence, but she doesn't see anything. So she's like, what is it exactly I'm running from? And then all of a sudden this car pulls out in front of her, and it's almost as if it's going to run her down. And then all of a sudden Evan shows up, and he tells her get on the back of the bike, and they end up in this chase where the car is trying to chase them down. She's on his motorcycle, and he ends up, I guess you could say, creating a diversion for the car, and the car ends up running right into a brick wall. And when the when the driver's side door opens, there's nobody there, and Gemma's kind of like off-put by it, and she wants explanations as to what's going on. After what happens, Evan takes her back to his place, which he shares with Drake, Simon, and Ginevra. And of course, he's like, I can't tell you, this is something that I shouldn't be talking to you about. He's like, I can't tell you. So she's just going to take off and head home. And he's like, you're not safe out there, I'll tell you. They go up onto the balcony of his house. I guess there's a balcony up on the second floor. And he pretty much tells her as well as shows her everything. Come to find out, he has powers. He can make himself invisible, so that's why when she feels like there's somebody there and she doesn't see anyone, it's actually him, but he's just shadowed, I guess is the best word to describe that. He can actually project his thoughts into her mind, almost as if she's reading his mind, and he can also project himself into her dreams. And he's also very quick and agile. He has very quick movements, almost like that of a cat. Definitely not those of a human. So she pretty much finds out, yes, he's a fallen angel. But he fails to mention that he was sent to kill her. He's basically not telling her because he's afraid of what her reaction is going to be, and he's afraid that he's going to lose her. And of course, Ginevra finds this out. She's like, you need to tell her. She ends up going and laying down to sleep because she'd been up all night after what had happened at the prom, and of course the whole chase down of the motorcycle with the car. She was exhausted, so she goes to lay down. They now know that this executioner is after Gemma, and they have to come up with this plan to try and save her. Well, at first there was this plan to give this executioner poison. But then Evan comes up with an even riskier plan to give Gemma the poison, have her die temporarily, tell this executioner that he insists on bringing her to the other side, and then bringing her back to life. And Simon and Drake are like, this is too risky, we don't know if this is going to work, and if it doesn't, Gemma's dead regardless. Evan's convinced that, you know, this is going to work. He goes to wake her up to tell her his plan, and she's gone. And of course his first thought is this executioner, this angel of death, has taken her. And now it's gotten personal. He wants revenge. And to go after the executioner, he says to Ginevra, you still have, you know, that poison. And of course what he's talking about is a vial of venom from a serpent or a snake that will only kill angels of death, or maybe angels in general, I'm not really sure. Brings him up to her room, where the only other person that's ever been allowed in there was Simon. Come to find out, the reason why nobody was ever allowed in her room is because she had kept her serpent, which she was supposed to end up killing when she left her witch coven. Now the serpent is the only one that has venom that can kill fallen angels, and it was too risky to have it around them, so she was supposed to get rid of it, but she tells Evan, you know, I couldn't. This snake is very much a part of me, as if it were part of my soul. If I kill the snake, I'm, you know, partially killing myself as well. After Evan gets over the shock and the anger of that, she ends up taking some of the venom from the snake, and she ends up putting it on a dagger that she ends up putting in a sheath. And she's like, you have to be very careful with this because otherwise you can end up, killing yourself. And he's like, don't worry, I wouldn't do it accidentally. Basically, he's at this point where he says, worst case scenario, if Gemma dies, then so do I. And that's pretty much what that meant when he said it. So we find out that the whole reason why Gemma took off is because this angel of death put himself into her dreams and pretty much convinced her that Evan was out to kill her. He told her about how Evan had been the one to end a couple of people's lives that I mentioned earlier in the story. A little girl that was in a burning building, he took her. He also took the life of the old man that she runs into before she goes into the forest in the beginning of the story. And he was also sent to kill her. So, of course, Gemma doesn't believe him until he actually alters the conversation that had happened with Evan and the other three. And, of course, he made it look like Evan wanted her dead. He didn't show her the part where he was saying, oh, I'm going to bring her back to life. He made it look like Evan was out to have her killed. So, she pretty much is convinced. She runs, she takes off, and she ends up in the woods once again. But this time, this angel of death is after her. We find out that this angel of death, his name is Faustian. I believe that's how you pronounce it. He chases her into the woods, and there's this lake behind the woods, and of course there's a lake house. So she goes and she tries to bar herself in there, and of course he follows her, and there's this big chase throughout the lake house. There's like secret passageways that you can get in and out of the house that are underground. He keeps popping up. She ends up injured a few times, and then of course he ends up chasing her to this window in the upstairs hallway, and he tells her who he is. Come to find out, this Faustian, I guess Evan was responsible for, ended up killing his girlfriend in a car accident, and this is pretty much revenge for him. You took the one I love, now I'm going to take the one you love. And he ends up pushing her out the window. And of course, as you read this part, you're thinking she's about to fall to her death. But Evan luckily shows up at the last second. He found her, catches her, saves her life. He tells her, stay put. She doesn't want him to sacrifice himself, so she follows him in. She ends up going through another passageway that's underground. And she's in there. They're fighting, and some of the ceiling beams fall, and one of the splinters gets embedded quite deeply into one of her shoulders, and she's really in rough shape. She's quite injured, and after Evan finally takes the dagger and kills Faustian, she ends up losing consciousness, her heartbeat slowing, all this. Come to find out, she actually dies for a few minutes. And Evan explains it to her, and of course she still is at the point where, I don't want to live if you won't get your. So I guess you could say she wanted to die so that Evan could get his salvation. I think that's, I can't quite remember what the word is, but anyway, she didn't want Evan to not be able to move on. And he said, I don't care, I want to be with you. And of course she, at the last moment, decides, yes, I'll live. But yeah, we basically find out that this whole war with the Masala, it's not over. But Evan's like, I'll be right there beside you to fight for you, fight for us. And it's basically the end of the book. Obviously, we find out that there's a second one, and I actually already bought the second one. I haven't started reading it yet because I'm trying to, I guess you could say, spread out what I read and when. I know some people could sit there and be like, oh, I could read an entire book series, book 1 to book whatever, and not, read anything else. But I personally am not like that. I prefer to switch up what books I'm reading. This book was really good. I absolutely loved it. I gave it a 5-star rating, I believe, on my Goodreads. And yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I will be doing a second video today. Well, that sounds weird. I don't normally do 2 videos, but I want to get 2 up in one day, kind of to make up for last week. But this next one will not really necessarily be book related per se. I mean, it kind of is. But yeah, I will talk about that in the next video. Thanks everybody for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.